Yes, folks, welcome back to Celtic Fans TV. Today I'm going to talk to Kenny about the transfer deals that Celtic have done so far. The arrivals of Yoki Kobayashi and Alistair Johnston have kick-started the January window before it's even officially opened. We'll talk about Celtic's plans in terms of incomings and outgoings, who we think will leave, if anyone, and what other areas of the squad Celtic might be looking to strengthen next month. We'll also discuss the speculation surrounding Giakoumakis and his contract and his future with the club. And we'll discuss the return of Peter Lawwell as chairman. Enjoy. Kenny, welcome back, mate. It's the 4th of December and Celtic have completed 2 signings ahead of the January transfer window. Now, I don't know about you, but I could get used to that.
Yeah, it's such a refreshing approach, isn't it, from the days gone by of signing Kazim Richards in the last minute just to fill a jersey, or signing even in more successful areas, Brendan Rodgers era. We still get the timing of things wrong, signing players after we've gone out of the Champions League qualifiers. Everybody's tearing their hair out. You'd make decent signings, but the ship had sailed. So, I mean, we've gone so far the other way now. We seem to be signing players for reasonable fees when we don't even really need them. I mean, we're signing a left back for £3 or £4 million on paper. We've already got two international right backs already there.
Yep.
So we're so ahead of the game now, it's hard to figure out what their plan is. You would assume that Juranovic, I can't see Ralston moving on, you would assume that Juranovic is going to move on, because why would you carry 3 international right backs? But it's so refreshing. It's hard. If it's hard to keep up with what they're thinking because they're thinking so proactively, that's an amazing place to be in. So, yeah, a couple of signings on the 4th of December, unprecedented for the club. And yeah, it just feels so fresh and so alive in terms of their overall approach.
Yeah, similar to last year as well. We knew that Hatate, Maeda and Ideguchi were coming in days before the January window even opened. So it is really good sort of proactive planning for the club. And Ange discussed that weeks ago when he was asked about the World Cup break, and he said that the plan is done for January. We'll be thinking about the summer during the break, and that is a really good footing for the club to be on. Have you had a chance to see much of Johnston in the World Cup, and would you make him?
I mean, I watched him consciously after it became obvious he was going to go with Celtic. And I like him. I mean, before we even talk about his playing style, I think Postecoglou always talks about he signs people that before he even looks at someone's playing style, he needs to know they're the right character. And that is his equal weighting, if not more weighting, in terms of how he brings players into the club. And that, for me, has proven itself to be a brilliant philosophy, because if you look at the characters, if you look at Joe Hart, if you look at all the guys that really play with their deal desire for the badge, Giakoumakis, we'll come to talk about him, but look at the guts he's got and how invested he is in the club so quickly. All of that is so key that he's into people's characters. And Johnson seems to have quite an infectious character about him. When you see him belting out the national anthem, when you hear him talk so passionately and so animatedly about Celtic and his future and wanting to come into European football, I can imagine it'd be a breath of fresh air in the dressing room. So I think that side of it is really good. He's at a good age at 24, and he seems to be a bit of an all-rounder. I can't comment on him with a great critique because I've only seen him play a couple of times, but he's got good pace. He used to play in central midfield when he started out his career, so he must have, you can see that he's comfortable with the ball at his feet. He's got a bit of steel about him at the end of that Belgian game. I think it was the end of the first half of the second half, but somebody went by him, he took a tactical foul, and he absolutely crucified the guy. So you can sense that he's got a bit of steel about him as well. So if he's got a good personality, he's got good steel, he's got good technical ability, then he's ticking all the boxes to be a good fit for us, and he's in that nice bracket of not costing too much, despite having now top-level international experience. If I was to look at any weaknesses, I was watching him closely against Croatia. He did get caught out a bit in behind against Croatia. Now, he's playing against a team that reached a World Cup final before, and a lot of those players were still there. So he's testing himself at a level that he's not going to be tested at every week with Celtic, far from it. But he did get caught in behind a little bit. Will he be able to cope, come to Europe? We don't know. It's another unknown because he's only ever played in Canada. So there's a couple of unknowns there. But in the round, I think it's a nice signing, yeah.
It's easy to get carried away with shiny new signings, but you've already mentioned Juranovic. Do you think that how early we've got this deal done for Alistair Johnston means that it will be January for Juranovic, or do you think we've got a chance of holding on to him until the summer? I know Croatia are still in the World Cup, so that might have a bearing on it, how deep they go into it. But do you expect him to leave in January?
I expect him to leave, whether it's January or the summer, I don't know. I actually don't like this sort of idea that if someone doesn't re-sign after 18 months into a 5-year deal,
They need to go.
that you just move them out. I mean, if we start doing that, well, I get that we need to be proactive, but that's too proactive. That's disruptive. January is a bad market for trying to do small rebuilds in your squad because history tells you that the availability of players isn't great. We've been very proactive here, but I don't want too much disruption in January for a side that's 9 points top of the table. So I don't really want to lose them because that's a lot of pressure on Johnston coming in. Ralston, to be fair, has been excellent. You could probably argue Ralston maybe deserves the spot ahead of Juranovic based on form in the last 2 months. But I can only think that with Celtic's resources, they wouldn't be consciously carrying 3 international right-backs in their squad. It just doesn't, it's imbalanced, doesn't it? It doesn't make sense. So logically, I would think that there's something in the background for Juranovic that is probably already done. I mean, if they're bringing the person in on this just speculatively that they're going to sell Juranovic, even that seems a bit of a stretch. I don't know. Who knows? But I would think the most likely outcome is there's probably something already done. But we'll probably get 10 to 12 for Juranovic, I would think. At a time we might have thought we'd have got more, but if you look at his age, if you look at the fact that his form's maybe dipped a little bit, if you sign him for 2, get a good 18 months out of him, sell him for 5 or 6 times that, and then bring in another international for a fraction of the cost, that's great. That's great business, and it's proactive business. Let's see how it plays out, but I would think that we're probably not going to see much more of Juranovic.
It does suggest that, doesn't it? Because he's come in so early. But with these things, it starts with some loose links, and there was those in the summer with Juranovic with Chelsea and Atletico Madrid, but I see they're starting to come back now with the likes of West Ham, and it does get to a stage where there's generally no smoke without fire, and I think the fact that we've signed Johnston in that position would suggest that it's going to be sooner rather than later that Juranovic does leave.
If he sees out his 5-year deal, he's going to be over 30. It's probably the peak time to sell him, actually. I would like to have him stayed to the summer. The peak time would be in the summer. You don't want to lose people of his experience in a January. You just don't. Yeah. But I don't think it's I don't think it's mismanagement if the way it's played out.
No, and I think his age as well determines that we do have to sell him sooner than some of the other guys in the team that are of good value, because he's in the middle of his peak, so we can't wait 2 or 3 years. That's just the situation we're in with him. In terms of Kobayashi, left-footed centre-half, do you think that's going to give us something in that area of the pitch that we don't have, and would you think the knock-on effect is there in terms of the pecking order?
I mean, I don't think Welsh has had a good season. A combination of injury and poor form has probably led me to believe that maybe if there's an outgoing, Welsh could be loaned, right? So that leaves you with Jens and Starfelt. We know what Starfelt can do, but he's not without his errors, Starfelt, right? I think if we're looking to take ourselves to the next level, it doesn't mean to say we get rid of Starfelt, but I think we need to have someone that can play at his level without the frequency of errors that he makes, or at least really, really pressure him to eliminate those from his game. Is Jens that person? At the start I thought it maybe was, and maybe it still is, but I think he's played enough now, Jens, for me to believe that there is also error within him. He's given away a lot. He's given away quite a lot of goals, from being bullied up at Ross County to giving away handballs in the Champions League. These things are costly. And he looks nice on the ball, but maybe that flatters to deceive when push comes to shove. So I think if there was one area where it's obvious that we can take ourselves up a notch, I think it is centre back. Now, can you do that by getting someone on a free transfer from Japan? Well, if you'd have asked us that 2 years ago, you'd say no. But given what we've gone through with our Asian recruitment, that may very well be the case. And this person is a left-footed centre back, which is a rare commodity. I mean, we had Chris Ayer playing in there before with a right foot. At times, I thought that was obvious. He did really well, Chris Ayer, but he couldn't take his game on because he didn't have a left foot. Charlie Mulgrew's probably the last person in there with a proper left foot that was playing in centre-back that I can remember. It is quite rare to pluck one, so that'll be nice because it'll mean they'll be able to link up with Taylor better. It means they'll be able to move into the middle of the park easier, because the one thing we don't actually get is our centre-back stepping forward too much. And he seems to be an all-rounder. I've never seen him play other than YouTube, right? So it'd be wrong to sit and make some dogmatic statements about him, but he seems to be a good ball player. He seems to have the height to suggest he's good in the air, and he seems to have strong in his duels. I think he's a free transfer ultimately. The only thing I would say about the centre-half area is if we are going to kick on and really kick on and use hopefully 2 years worth of Champions League money, I'd like to see us spend maybe a bit more on, £9 million for Edouard is our record signing. If you want to truly kick on in the centre-half area, you would need to probably break your transfer fee record to go out and get somebody maybe at 10 million. Now it's very hard to judge whether that's realistic unless you're in the real closeness of all of the finances. But I think if there's one area where I'd like to go out maybe in the summer and see us spend serious money, it would be someone that just goes out right beside Vickers, takes the number 4, starts every week and really takes us up a notch. Maybe this player will be that, and we've got 6 months to trial it and see how it goes. But it seems like a risk-free, nice signing, and the pecking order probably comes in and marries up with Jens, and I think it might mean trying to move Welsh out to free up a wee bit of wages.
Yeah, I think we've signed some really good technical attacking players from the other side of the world. Yet to sign a defender though, and Kobayashi will be the first one. It's just about adapting for him because
it's a centre half.
So he did. That was a bygone era. Hopefully he's better than Douay anyway.
Yeah, I hope so.
That's a low bar, but it's just about adapting, isn't it? To I'm sure football's played differently here. He'll come up against some big physical presences, and he looks decent in there. But that will be the challenge for him. And to be fair, all of the individual players that we've signed from Japan have adapted really quickly. But again, it's just they're attacking players, really. So interesting to see how he adapts playing in defence.
Yeah, and he'll settle in. He'll settle in easier, you would think, because he's got 4 of his countrymen around him, right? So to sort of show him the ropes and make him feel comfortable. That's always a risk when you buy someone from, a really foreign market. Yeah, that's a good point. Will a centre-back handle getting battered and bruised up at Dingwall? Who knows? He might just find that so alien to him that he can't cope. But I don't know. I think that's a bit presumptuous. We saw Hatate change his sort of approach a little bit. You commented to me in the last video that he eyeballed somebody after he got a late tackle. He would never have done that when he came here. And people can change. So I think it's a good signing. I think on a free transfer, why not use that market again? And the profile of him fits nicely. So no, I'm pretty pleased with him.
Aye, absolutely, a great age, and again, you trust Ange to get it right and recruiting for the J League based on the experience we've seen so far. Along with Juranovic, though, Kenny, we've seen some speculation about Giakoumakis this week, kind of coming out of nowhere. Again, it's that contract thing that you've mentioned there. Maybe some suggestions that the talks are stalling in terms of maybe an extension. Do you think that Giakoumakis will have his head turned by a move given lack of game time?
Ange said this week that he judges everything on the training field first and foremost, right? When Moussa Dembele had his head turned, do you remember the images of him in training? It was cringeworthy. In fact, Brendan Rodgers had to pull him out of training and take him into the boardroom and say, right, you're getting sold because you're damaging the environment. I don't get that sense that Giakoumakis is going to be doing that, right? He seems to really love Celtic. He seems really happy here. He's one of all of our players. I'd put him in right up the top in terms of application and desire and just their overall want to do well. If he misses a penalty or he misses a bad chance, he's infuriated with himself. He's got really high standards for himself. So I think I don't think there's any signs that he's completely invested. If we got a £15 million bid from the English Premier League, he wouldn't go that high up in the English Premier League, but he could probably play for a club in the bottom half. That he would quadruple his wages. Would that turn his head at his age? He's not a kid. He's not quite as old as Juranovic, but at the end of his deal, he'll be 30. Could that turn his head? He's a human being, of course that could. He's not like you and I, who'll just be completely blind by a love of Celtic. He's from Greece. But I think that remains an unknown. I don't think there's enough signs there to suggest that will be the case. I wouldn't like to see him go. I think we're pretty reliant on him in terms of using him off the bench to disrupt games whereby we don't get in the right rhythm. You've got him as a different option. He's scored. He's scored so many good clinical one-touch finish goals. That's hard to find. It's hard to find in our budget. He cost £2 million. He was the top scorer on the Dutch league. People kind of forget about that. So I think there's enough there to say that it's a problem if he goes. I think there's enough there to say that he's still invested in the club. I would just be inclined to revisit it with him in the summer. Just say, okay, you don't want to re-sign a deal after 18 months. I don't really blame you for that. There's a lot to go here. Let's not move him out and get a replacement. Let's revisit it in the summer. But you just don't know with the speculation. Maybe there is another. Maybe in the 1st of January he is going to go for big money, and the speculation's just born out of the fact that it's been out with Celtic's control. I hope not. Hopefully he stays, because I do think he's an important part of the squad.
Aye, it definitely is an important part of the squad. Maybe it is just baseless rumours, and again, you can never know with these things until they become more concrete, unless you're Giakoumakis himself or his agent or somebody in the workings of the club.
I find it hard to believe that Celtic would revisit a 5-year deal after 18 months and then consciously move players out.
Yeah,
that seems crazy.
I think that's
so. I don't think that's at its heart.
No, I think that's why we're getting players on 5-year deals. And I think we've seen it with Kobayashi and Johnston as well. Is to give the club that security that if they get 2 years in, they've still got that extra year at the end. Because if you start the 3rd season in a 4-year deal, it gets to that 18-month left period, and then there can be doubts and players' head can get turned. But I think 5-year deal kind of protects the club in terms of that. I had a look at the numbers. I know we've debated, and most of the fan base has debated all season. If you're playing one player up front, would you prefer it to be Kyogo or Giakoumakis? And everyone knows where I stand on that. But Giakoumakis has only had 7 starts this season. From a possible 23, he's only been fit for 21 of those, though. Kyogo's had 17. 11 goals for Kyogo, 8 for Giakoumakis. And this season, I don't think it was the case last season, but this season, Kyogo is 112 minutes per goal and Giakoumakis is 115 minutes per goal. A thing that stands out to me about both of them, despite the fact that I do prefer Kyogo in terms of what he brings to Postecoglou's style, is that they do both contribute and they're very good goal scorers, and it's rare for Celtic in the last 10 to 15 years. Obviously Martin O'Neill's team was littered with top class strikers, but it's rare to have 2 strikers at that level. Certainly domestically, I know those 2, along with the rest of the squad, struggled to make that leap in the Champions League this season, but I think those 2 are really, really good players, and they're both contributing and they're both goal scorers.
Yeah, I don't think there are years gone by. Usually, you've got a main striker. If Edouard would fit, he would play. If Dembele was fit, he would play. But I don't think it's clear, actually. I mean, look at the statistics there. I mean, their goals per minute's almost identical. I don't think either of them have had a blistering enough season to say that they're definitely, the number 9. I don't think either of them have had a poor enough season to say that the other one's the number 9. They're sort of keeping pace with one another. But the nice thing about them is that their styles contrast. Kyogo's a brilliant technician, great pace in behind. But if that's not working, and it often doesn't work at home, we've found ourselves with problems with Kyogo as an outlet against a low block at home. We just have. He can't, he doesn't really dominate things in the air. He can't get in behind people if they're 6 yards from goal. That's a problem, and that's when you can bring Giakoumakis on. And we've saw him disrupt things and score late goals. And I like the fact that their styles contrast, and that's maybe why the sort of speculative deputies for Giakoumakis were to move on. The South Korean striker is of that style, right? Big guy, bustly guy. I'd quite like it if Giakoumakis unfortunately was to move, that we kept that contrast. But I don't know. It's not clear in my mind who's the number 9. At the start, I thought it was Giakoumakis, but I think it's simply up for grabs. It's probably it's just in my mind, it's too close to call.
Yeah, and that fits with Ange wanting to rotate and balance the squad throughout congested fixture periods. Obviously, hand in hand with links for players going out. There's double the amount of links with players coming in. You mentioned South Korea's. I think it's Gyo Sung-Chu. He got 2 goals against Ghana. He'll probably play against Portugal in the last 16 as well. Looks a good player, relatively similar to Giakoumakis, big in terms of his size, really good in the air. Those 2 goals against Ghana were both headers. His movement looks good. Again, you don't know too much about how much there is in these rumours. I think Ferencváros are also linked with him. We've also been linked with Mohamed Magdi from Al Ahly in Egypt. He's an attacking midfielder. Do you think, obviously, with the links with Cho, you would think that's linked to the speculation for Giakoumakis, but an attacking midfielder, does that fit with the areas you think we might be looking at? We've obviously got the 2 defenders in. What other areas do you think we'll be looking at next month?
I mean, I don't think goalkeepers covered, clearly. I think bringing in those two defenders, but we certainly don't need another right back. We don't need another centre half. I think Kobayashi can actually play at left back in cases, and maybe that was another appeal of him because Bernabei has looked a bit. Bernabei scares me a bit in a pressure game with the prospect of throwing him at left back. So if Kobayashi can offer you a bit of steel at left back, maybe that's another benefit to him. So I think defensively we're completely covered. We don't need any more wingers. There's no point in even discussing why. We've got loads of wingers. So I think you're left really with. I think there's a tenuous argument you need. You still need a third striker, right? Kyogo and Giakoumakis are relatively injury-prone strikers. We've kind of been fortunate this year that they've dovetailed if they've ever been out. But it doesn't do you any harm to have a young, hungry third striker in behind them in any event. If you look back to how Edwards came into the side, he was signed at a point in time where we had Moussa Dembele and Lee Griffiths had just scored had finished a 40-goal campaign. We had two nailed-on people that were going to start ahead of him every week. But we recognised that those people may move on. Edward came in as a 19-year-old on loan. We didn't pay any money for him. And then a year later, we realised that we really wanted to invest in him because Dembele was moving on and the whole thing had a real nice succession to it. If next year Giakoumakis does move on, that does introduce a bit of a problem for succession. If both of them are injured, as they were last season, you're down to play Maeda through the middle. He's not great through the middle, Maeda, right? He's not been great in this World Cup through the middle. So I think there's an argument for a third striker, maybe a young person on loan. Hopefully not another Klamala, right? They attempted it with him and it failed, but just a well-scouted young striker. Is there an argument for another playmaker? You would probably intuitively just say no. However, if McGregor gets injured, you're dropping O'Reilly back in there, and we've had to do that for the last, 2 months.
Yeah.
And what's that? What has that meant? That's meant that we've had a little bit of confusion in the number 10. We've had to play Haksabanovic in there sometimes, which is just a stopgap because I don't say that's really his position. Away to St Johnstone, we had to drop him in there. Moyes kind of played a bit of a hybrid role in there, but I wouldn't really say, if you watch Moyes' strengths, it's clear now from the World Cup that sitting in behind people and dictating the game from deep is his strengths, it would seem to me. So we have suffered a bit in having a stick-on playmaker that comes in if O'Reilly needs to step out or if indeed Tatati was injured. I think those two would be a bit of a luxury, right? If we close the window now, and we may well do, I'd be totally happy with the squad. But if you were being really sort of picky, I don't think a third striker or another number 10 would be wasted investments. I think any other wingers would be, or another goalkeeper would be, or another defender would be. But, you could argue that a wee bit of support in there would be of help. And then what about outgoings? What's your thoughts on outgoings? Any?
I mean, other than Juranovic, who seems the obvious one now, it's really hard to say that there's been no links really with anyone else aside for Giakoumakis that we've just discussed. I think probably the January's going to come way too early for links with most of them. I know a couple of the guys you'd maybe think have another move in them at some point in their time. Hatate, Kyogo, maybe didn't make the World Cup squad, so I think they're safe for now. O'Reilly's one that, I mean, he was linked with big clubs before Celtic managed to grab him, so he's one that I think links might not be too far away if he keeps up his levels. I don't know how long we're going to be able to hang on to him, but I'm confident that other than Juranovic, I don't really expect to lose anyone in January, certainly. Carter Vickers again is at the World Cup. They were obviously eliminated yesterday and he never played. Having just signed in the summer, him and Jota, I'd like to think we get at least 2 full seasons out of them as permanent players. So I think that's it for outgoings. I hope that's it. If anyone, only Juranovic. But I just wanted to touch on goalkeeper there, because I agree right now that we definitely don't need one. We brought Siegrist in, who's a great understudy in the summer. But it's been in the back of my mind thinking about how well we're forward planning. When we get to the summer, how many more seasons have we got out of Joe Hart? And I know some people have, like games in the Champions League, some people have questioned, is he quite at the level at this stage of his career where he can have a Fraser Foster game and keep a top-class side out and help you get something from the game? How many more seasons can we get out of him? And will we maybe look at goalkeeper in the summer in terms of earmarking the next number one and bringing him in ahead of time? What do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, that is a good observation. How many more years will we get out of him? It's very hard to tell. History tells you can play until you're 40, at the height of the game if your body is built that way, but you're talking about Buffon and people like that doing that, right? You're talking about people at the absolute elite level of the game. And Joe Hart was an elite level goalkeeper in his earlier days, but his body took took toll on his body. He wasn't without his injuries, Joe Hart. So, and quite bad injuries. So that would leave me to suggest that he probably won't be playing until he's 40. I think he's maybe 35 now?
Yeah, 35,
I think he's got 1 year
36.
left on his, I think it was a 3-year deal, right? So he'll have 1 year left in the summer. I think he's got more than 1 year left in him. I know he's made a couple of errors in the Champions League, right? But, it's very rare that you have a goalkeeper that doesn't make any errors throughout the season. I think he does a lot in terms of the dressing room. I think he still performs well in terms of his agility and his ability to make camera saves. He still does that. He's not devoid of that. It's not just about his dressing room presence and doing the sort of mundane part of goalkeeping. He can still make pretty spectacular and sharp saves. So I wouldn't be in a rush to sort of say, right, at the end of your third year, Joe, you're definitely out. I don't think there's any evidence that we should do that. So I would look to extend Hart in the summer. Would I look to maybe bring someone in behind him a bit younger? I'd maybe do that the year after, Paul. I don't think doing it next year is a necessity based on Hart's fitness levels at the moment and just how important he is in the dressing room. And if we hadn't signed Seagrass, yes, but Seagrass is at the start of a 4-year, maybe I don't know exactly know the terms of his deal, but he's going to have another 3 years ahead of him in the summer. So I would think it's maybe a point of consideration for the summer of 23 rather than this summer. But you don't know, Joe Hart. That is a concern of mine as well. He could just have his form could just fall off a cliff because of his age and his body just gives up on him. And we do need to be prepared for that.
Yeah, interesting to see if we do anything with that. I think I'm probably a wee bit premature on it, but it's just been in the back of my mind because of how well we've been planning recently. Last one today, mate. Reluctantly, we need to discuss Peter Lawwell's return as the chairman. The club kept it for my birthday as well. Brilliant. They must have known I was waiting on it. They didn't announce it on social media. They didn't talk about it at the AGM 3 weeks ago. What does that tell you about what they know about what people's feelings are towards it?
I mean, look, it's a really regressive thing to do, isn't it? I mean, if you think of it, the one thing that's made everyone just so pleased about the direction of the club is just how fresh and how progressive it is, right? I mean, when do we sign players? And we don't sign. Historically, the club never signed players in December, thinking they're almost 2 steps ahead of where the fans even expect them to be. And just around the boardroom, just the social media channels, there seems to be this freshness about the club that everyone is really riding a bit of a wave on, and it's feeding its way through the park, right? I mean, look at how we're performing. It doesn't go, you don't just perform because of 11 players. You perform because as an organisation, you're moving in the right direction. And that's a really regressive appointment because at the end of Peter Lawwell's tenure, it was a catastrophe, wasn't it? I mean, it was, some of the decisions he made in that final season were an absolute abomination, and it resulted in driving a big stake between the fans and the club. So why in your right mind would you want to reintroduce something that brings that at risk? How does Michael Nicholson feel about it? I mean, presumably I guess it might be naive of us to think if Lawwell has ever truly been away, right? He's probably been operating in some capacity behind the scenes. So in that respect, maybe it's not that big a risk that, in 2 months' time, Michael Nixon's going to resign or Angie's going to be annoyed. Maybe that's not really a risk, but I don't imagine it's a very nice thing for Michael Nicholson to have hanging over him, because the way Lawwell operated is he was an authoritarian character, right? He controlled everything. I mean, it was so obvious. He was a one-man band. Can he really operate in the capacity? Is he professional enough to operate in the capacity of a non-exec? Maybe he is, right? I don't actually view Peter Lawwell with as much disdain as perhaps a lot of the support, right? He's made a lot of mistakes. He also brought in Ange Postecoglou under pressure. The one thing that Lawwell, I've always respected him for, is when Rangers were rattling off title after title and using EBTs, it took a really strong chief executive to protect Celtic at that point, right? They could have, he must have been under internal pressure to use EBTs himself to try and match what Rangers were doing and get himself out of a hole. He didn't. He was absolutely resolute, right? And he protected the very fabric of Celtic during that time. Well, Rangers were liquidated. They were harping back a bit here, right? But he was there. He was the man that did that. So I think we need to look at it in a balanced way. When you look at his legacy, it's very easy to remember the 10-in-a-row disaster. But we also must give that some balance. The amount of trophies that we won under his tenure will never happen again. So he's had some good history, Peter Lawwell, but his recent history has not been good enough to justify bringing him back in and make everyone feel like we're sort of starting to regress again when it's the last thing we should be doing. I think we should just wave him on, but he's here. He's going to be here for a while. We'll just need to hope that he is professional enough to act as a non-executive, because a non-executive works a few days a month for the club, right? That's the very definition of a non-executive. Is he going to be capable of doing that? Is he going to start putting his fingers in more pies? Time will tell. But for the moment, Ange Postecoglou seems to speak highly of him, presumably because he brought him over here. So that's the key thing. As long as Ange is happy, we're happy. And Michael Nicholson, we should say, has done a superb job since he came in, an outstanding job since he came in, and hopefully that's not disturbed because of this also. But in the respect that if he has truly never been away, maybe we shouldn't be too worried.
Yeah, I think you'd be forgiven for thinking he's never really been away, because they rolled out Ange as Don Mackay's guy, and then once Don Mackay was binned, it became quite clear, as we knew it was Peter Lawwell's influence that brought Ange to the club, because he came from a Citigroup club in Japan, and obviously Peter Lawwell's son, who worked with the Citigroup, is now the head of recruitment at Celtic. I think, regardless of what you think of him, I know people debate it all day long, his record and the mistakes he made and the things he got right in his time as chief executive. He had his time as chief executive 17 years, and it ended really, really badly. I think the mistakes weren't just in the 10-in-a-row season. The mistakes were bringing Neil Lennon back permanently in the first place after Brendan Rodgers left, and numerous mistakes through his tenure as well. I think in terms of how we went about things when Rangers weren't in the top flight. But some people would argue it's better the devil you know, because I'm sure there's worse ownership structures in football. We've seen plenty of them. But I think to bring him back as the chairman when the club know what the feeling towards him was, as a bit of a slap in the face for the supporters. I think the fact that he was never away is also that, but the club pretended that there was this big sort of reshuffle and refresh after that season with Peter Lawwell leaving, and everyone is still there, apart from Ian Bankier, who's obviously retiring. Everyone's there. The makeup of the board is the exact same. So things are going great on the pitch. There's absolutely no doubt about that. The longer it remains that way, the better. The longer Ange stays, the better. I'm just concerned that the thinking that created the previous problems at Celtic were brought about by a board which is now exactly the same. So can we say they won't make that mistake again if someone comes and plucks Ange in the middle of the night? Although we think Ange wouldn't leave in the same manner that Rodgers did. But if Ange is to leave, what's the next step? How do the club better plan and future-proof so that when Ange leaves, everything that he done here and all the good work doesn't leave with him? I don't have a great deal more confidence now that the board wouldn't make those same sort of mistakes again. But listen, we're in a great place right now, and as I say, it was reluctant to discuss this because I want to focus on the football, and everything's going great on the pitch just now. So, any final thoughts, Kenny? Anything we've not covered in terms of the transfer business?
I don't think so. No, look, it's just we just feel like we're in a great place. That first game back against Aberdeen is a huge game, I think, for Celtic.
Yeah.
Rangers will have some sort of buoyancy because they've at least alleviated. A new manager bounce happens in many cases. It may happen to them. All eyes will be on Celtic that night. All eyes will be on Celtic. If we drop points, they'll think, oh, well, hang on, there's a sniff here. See if we go out and put in a dominant display, keep them at arm's length and 9 points, then they've got to go to Aberdeen. It's the psychology of that is very challenging for Rangers. So that's a big, big night for Celtic. Hopefully we get Cameron Carter-Vickers back for that night. I don't know about I don't really know about the nuances of how long they need off, or I'd imagine Postecoglou would drag him home even if he didn't. he didn't want to. But that's a big moment, I think. But I'm excited by it, and the fact that we're getting our transfer business done. We're doing a transfer video on the 4th of December rather than the 31st of January, welcoming in Carlton Cole as we've done in the past. Then that just makes all the difference. So I miss Celtic at the moment. Everyone does when there's a break, and can't wait to have it back. But we're in a great place.
Aye, absolutely can't wait for that game at Pittodrie, and I think it's vital that we go to Ibrox after New Year with that 9-point gap, because it'll put us in a really strong position, whatever the outcome is. There you go. That's it for this video. Like it below, comment with your own thoughts on everything we've discussed, and please don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. We'll see you again on the next video shortly. Cheers.